Space Hunter. This was the working title for Metroid during its development. In fact, this title was used for so long that you can even find it still mentioned in the original manual. The reason why it was changed was, I believe, due to copyright. I think someone else had already trademarked the title Space Hunter, so Metroid was chosen as an alternative. The name itself is a combination of Metro, as in like a train, and Android, because during early development, like Samus was originally conceived as like either like a full-on robot or like a cybernetic soldier. And the Metro part is referring to how you're exploring like all these like caverns in the world. But if you think it's kind of a stretch to compare dank, dark, labyrinthian alien worlds to a subway station, then you clearly never been to the Boston T stations.
Okay, so it's been like years since I lived in Boston, so maybe things have gotten better and cleaned up. But I still ain't going on the orange line if my life depended on it.
Samus is named after a soccer player. Specifically, the player... Let's see if I can get this right in the first try. Edison Ernesto do Nascimento. Nailed it. Left-facing Samus. In the files of the original Metroid, if you look within the sprites, there's a series of sprites animating Samus facing the left side with her arm cannon. Chibi Zero Mission. During Metroid Zero Mission's development, the original art style was going to go for a more cutesy look to try and emulate the style of the original NES game. Ultimately, the decision was made to make it more closer to Super Nintendo and the previous Metroid Fusion games. And I think that was a decision made for the better, but I wouldn't be opposed to them like revisiting this kind of art style for like a spin-off game. They kind of went for that in Federation Force, so I like to see it in a more better receptive game. Cut Crocomire fight. In Zero Mission, Crocomire was supposed to appear as a boss. You can even find sprites of him in the game's files, but for whatever reason, he's been cut. Maybe it's due to time constraints, maybe it's because they couldn't figure out where to put him while still keeping the map loyal to the original game, like, who knows. Metroid 2 DX. So Metroid 2 was actually supposed to be remade all the way back in the 90s with a DX version, similar to how Link's Awakening DX got an updated version for the Game Boy Color. A German video game magazine even showed like a screenshot of what this Metroid 2 in color game would have looked like. But as far as we can tell, like, it just never happened, and no one really knows why. You can still play the original Metroid 2 on a Game Boy Color, but all it really does is it changes the level sprites blue and Samus and all the enemies red. It does make things a bit more visually legible, but I think we can all agree a full color version with maybe some quality of life improvements would have been greatly appreciated. SR-388 was named after a motorcycle. The homeworld of the titular Metroids is a planet labeled SR-388, and apparently the name was inspired by the Yamaha SR-400 series that was popular at the time, and was a motorcycle that was rode by someone on the development team. However, the 400 label is a bit of a false advertisement. It's actually a 388 cylinder engine, and it was likely just rounded up to 400 or decreased to 388 because of the Speed Wars that was happening at the time. And yes, the Speed Wars was a real thing, and you should look it up. It's awesome and hilarious. In Japan, because of this, it was colloquially known as the SR-388. And speaking of feelings, I suspect that the developer in question was the composer of the Metroid series, who was known for riding a motorcycle to work, but that's only assuming he was the only one on the development team who rode motorcycles. Still it sounds in Super Metroid. So some of the roars for the boss characters were lifted directly from Godzilla monsters, specifically Titanosaurus and Anguirus. And I gotta say, it's kinda ironic. Nintendo is so draconian about how people like play around with their IPs when it comes to like fan content stuff, but they apparently have no problem just lifting stuff directly from Toho. Stalk, Bang, and Reflet. These are scrapped enemies from Super Metroid that have been found in the game's code. The mechanical looking one is Reflet, and according to like what programming could be found of it, it may not have even been an enemy, but more like an obstacle, because it doesn't really hurt Samus, it just makes her projectiles fly in like different directions, so it's probably more of like a puzzle solving element than anything else. Bang is like the red one, the red globulous one, and it's identical to an enemy that already exists in the game, like this green one that kind of like leeches onto Samus and like drains her health and slows her down the more there are of them on her. So it's presumed that this one will behave like similarly. And the tiny Crocomire is stock. From what I can tell, there's no programming attached to this thing. It just kind of like stands there. Maybe this was meant to be like a baby Crocomire, similar to like the baby Dracomire. You weren't really supposed to like interact with them at all. They're just like a background set piece, which is why you can't really interact with them, but who knows. Naked Samus in Super Metroid. Samus's death animation in the games has her like explode from her power suit and reveal like her undergarments underneath. Originally in Super Metroid, she is just supposed to be flat out naked, but Nintendo decided against it at the last minute in order to avoid causing a big scandal internationally when they released the game overseas. And no, I tried looking all over the place. God knows I tried for a lot longer than I like to admit. But no, I can't find like actual sprites of this laying around. I think it's safe to say that if naked sprites were drawn up, then the bikini was drawn over it. So nothing of this remains, unfortunately. But I'm sure y'all be doing just fine. Unused sounds in the Super Metroid finale. I got nothing. Like, I seriously got nothing. I've tried asking around, I've did so much researching, I did so much digging, but I cannot for the life of me figure out what this thing is talking about. So if anyone at all has any idea what this could be, like, please let me know down in the comments, because I don't know, this thing has beaten me. Metroid 64. So if you look at the timeline of releases in the series, you'll notice that there was an 8-year gap between Super Metroid and the first Metroid Prime game, which means the entire Nintendo 64 life went without a single Metroid game. And it turns out this was because series director Sakamoto just had no idea how to translate the series into 3D. Obviously nowadays, when we look back on it, a first-person shooter was like the most obvious solution, but Japan didn't really do first-person shooters back then. Hell, they barely do it now. So nobody at Nintendo knew how to like build or design a game like that. There's a lot of rumors out there that say there was indeed like a prototype built out there, but these are all confirmed to be false. So if you ever see any footage of supposedly Metroid 64 footage or a Metroid 64 beta, it's either a hoax or a fan project. Ninja Gaiden and Metroid Other M. The Wii game Metroid Other M was developed by Team Ninja, who were the guys who created the 3D Ninja Gaiden games, and all of these titles run on their own custom engine. In Metroid Other M's files, you can find a skyscraper area that was lifted directly from one of the Ninja Gaiden games, and they basically use this area to playtest. Metroid RPG. Okay, so this was something I learned as I was already recording this video, but a while back there was this huge information leak from Nintendo that spilled a lot of beans about games that were canceled or in development or what have you, just company secrets and all that. And at the time of this recording, about like 2 weeks ago, people have found information within these leaks that Intelligent Systems were also in the talks of pitching their version of a Metroid game to Nintendo. For those of you who aren't aware, Intelligent Systems are the Fire Emblem people, and before they became the Fire Emblem people, they developed the 2 Paper Mario games that no one shuts up about, Advance Wars, and a lot of other RPG and strategy games. Now, this is purely speculation on my part. I have no evidence to like back this up, but just knowing like the studio's history, the type of games they develop, and the talent they have, I'm willing to bet a lot of money that their pitch was going to be a spin-off game that was a Metroid RPG game. Or even more wild, since they create a lot of games that are strategy based and have tile manipulation, what if they were pitching an XCOM style game taking place in the Metroid universe? Fucking imagine that. Imagine Samus paddling around with other bounty hunters and Federation soldiers, and it could even have like Fire Emblem elements where every single unit actually has like a unique personality that you can talk to and have conversations with and develop bonds with, instead of just being these blank slates like the XCOM games usually do. And this would have been such a great way to expand the lore and setting of Metroid, and I want this now! Obviously, this pitch was denied, and we don't even have like concept art as to what this game could have been. All we know is like Intelligent Systems were just interested in making a Metroid game. and nothing beyond that. Maybe talks proceeded privately and was still denied. I suspect that if it was indeed an XCOM style game, maybe Nintendo didn't want this to compete with Mario & Rabbids Kingdom Battle, which was either still in development or right around the corner of being released. I don't know, guys. I love Kingdom Battle to pieces, but I think I want this more. Hopefully, Metroid Dread and Metroid Prime 4 combined will be successful enough that Nintendo will be inclined to make more spin-off titles between the big releases, and Next Level and Intelligent Systems pitches can be revisited. Because the more I think about this, the more I need this. Wario and Fusion. Metroid Fusion was also developed on the same engine as Wario Land 4, so if you look inside the game's files, you'll find some of the assets are still in there, like the blue crystals and the stone blocks. And I kind of find it funny. I can't remember if Sakamoto was involved in Wario Land 4, but it seems like when he's not making Metroid games, he's working on the WarioWare franchise. Metroid Fusion Remake. Years ago, Mercury Steam approached Nintendo with a pitch to remake Metroid Fusion as a 2.5D action game. However, Nintendo turned it down because they feel like Metroid Fusion didn't warrant a remake, but they were impressed by Mercury Steam's work, and seeing their repertoire working on Castlevania games, they decided to give the studio a chance by letting them remake a different Metroid game, Metroid 2, which then turned into the 3DS remake, Metroid Samus Returns. Metroid Fusion was going to be pre-rendered. Okay, so this one tripped me up for a while, but thanks to some help from Super Red Plays, we were able to deduce that this was referring to a super early version of Metroid Fusion that seems to only exist in this promotional footage from E3 2001. And I gotta say, this looks absolutely nothing like the final game. First of all, the graphics both look really good and really bad. In some of these shots, it looks like it would be impossible for it to be rendered on a Game Boy Advance, but in other shots, it looks like it came from a freaking Game Boy. Samus is in all dark armor. Looks really menacing, actually. It doesn't even take place on the space colony like in the final game, but rather just this one singular spaceship. But what's most striking to me is the fact that there seems to be a large emphasis on gravity manipulation as the main mechanic, which is something that we still haven't really seen in any other Metroid games. This is honestly the most exciting find while I was researching this Iceberg so far. It seems that Metroid Fusion has a far more complicated development history than we initially believed, and I really want to know what happened to this version of the game. I love Fusion, how it turned out now. It's one of my favorite Metroid games of all time. I'm just super curious to see where along the lines development lines shifted from this into the final product. So this next layer of the iceberg is going to be dedicated entirely to Metroid Prime cut content, because, oh lord, there's a lot.